Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to episode 104 of the podcast. Can you believe it? There's something special there. 104 is 2 times 52 because this is the end of the second year of the podcast, which is pretty amazing. Sometimes I feel like it went by really fast, and other times I feel like, man, I started that thing 5 years ago, I think, because there's been so many interviews, so many great conversations, so many guests, lots of repeat guests. We have another one next week, which I know you're going to love. So today I talk with Sam Collier, and Sam and I talk about his new book, Find Your Voice, and how that can be helpful for all of us. But also we kind of lean in a little bit to how that can help other people as well. How can we can use this concept in this book and the things he talks about to help other people in our churches, including students. The subtitle is Capturing the Power of Influence to Live a Greater Story. And obviously that's something we want. Before we jump in, I just want to say thanks to all of you who have listened, downloaded, subscribed, shared the podcast, left a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It's been really helpful. It's been a great 2 years. I hope it's been helpful to you. I hope it's something that has been a resource for you in your ministry and your leadership, and you've gotten some ideas and things that you can apply to your ministry. So I'm excited for year 3. We'll kick that off next week and celebrate in some other ways. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Sam about his new book, Find Your Voice. Well, today I'm talking with Sam Collier. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Nick, so excited.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do. And I want to specifically ask you more about your role with Orange, but just kind of give us an introduction to yourself for anybody who's not familiar with you.
Yeah, man, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, been in ministry for a little over 10 years, started off with a nonprofit that works in the inner city. We reached about 80,000 to 100,000 kids in a year in the inner city. The idea was to make smart cool. So we leveraged culture for influence to make education relevant. Simply put, we threw massive parties for kids that get all A's and B's in impoverished areas. I mean, massive. I mean, Xboxes, Jordans, celebrities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Cool.
That's crazy. That was kind of my intro to ministry. And then I was at simultaneously at a black church, about 25,000 members strong. I was over young adults, college, high school, middle school, praise teams, choirs, bands, a little bit of youth strategy. We went through a scandal. It dropped from 25,000 to 3,000 in 1 year. And wow. I was really looking for a church I could believe in again. And somebody said, you should try North Point. And I was like, what is that? I'm black and, yeah. I grew up around nothing but black people. And so I showed up and it was nothing but a ton of white people. And now obviously it's more diverse, a lot more diverse than when I showed up. But ended up meeting Andy through a mutual friend, introducing him to Bernice King, Martin Luther King's daughter, who I worked with a lot in the nonprofit. And then from there, my friend who knew Andy asked me if I hosted or spoke at all. And they, gave me a shot to be on the North Point stage hosting at Buckhead Church and on a Sunday morning. And then I looked up and I was hosting on a ton of stages at North Point and speaking at a ton as well. So I became a communicator there and then started consulting organizations like Catalyst and Orange on diversity.
And with Orange, you're also kind of the director of the city strategy, which I would love for you to expand on a little bit and tell us, what's that about? What do you get to do in that role with Orange?
Yeah, man. So the director of city strategy is all about churches that are in the city or are in a multicultural context or an urban context or even an inner city context. So this whole thing started when I met Reggie through John Acuff because I was hosting at Big Stuff camps. And again, I've already made the announcement that I was black. With that being said, I didn't know. I mean, the whole Big Stuff world was new to me as well. And I didn't even know who John Acuff was. And so he was talking to me and I was like, who's this guy? I mean, I wasn't hating on him at all. I just was like, man, who's this guy? And people were coming up to me like, do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? And I was like, no, who is he? They said, you should Google John A. Cup. And so I Googled and I was like, whoa. And from there, he said, man, with all the work you're doing in the inner city, you really need to meet Reggie Joyner. And so he introduced me to Reggie through Kristen Ivy. And long story short, we just started dreaming about what Orange could look like if it was extremely multicultural. And at the time, Orange had already been seeing a lot of churches that were in an inner city context, urban context, or just multicultural context in general, or even, Hispanic, Asian, all of that is starting to join the Orange family. And so he's like, man, let's figure out how to do this better. Help us turn the ship that we're already trying to turn. And so I focus on helping us diversify our content, diversify our pool of leaders that we're using to write and to speak at our events, and just being a part of the team myself and helping to lead the city strategy as we help churches in the city win.
That's awesome. I would say I've told Reggie this before, and I love his posture about it, but like you can definitely see the intentionality with diversity through Orange at conference, at tour, and even like Next, the event for Next Gen Pastors that's been real small. So when I say that to him, he's always asking me for like, you think so? What else can we do? Like, I just love the posture too that he has, that they're just always looking to do better in every year.
Yeah.
Including that. Yeah. So, but you could definitely see that. So that's great. I remember, in fact, there was the YMLX, the Youth Ministry Leadership Exchange thing. It just so happened that one of the social media posts only highlighted like 3 of the speakers and they were all white. And somebody commented like, hey, is there going to be any diversity? And somebody else commented, you click the link, because it was like, oh, okay. It is really diverse. It just so happened in that. But it's like, people, obviously, they want to see themselves. I remember some of the things that Reggie has said about that I think are powerful. This year, we just had a podcast a couple weeks ago with some friends of mine who were at Orange, and we all talked about how powerful it was, that conversation on stage about diversity and racial unity and all that stuff. So good work, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because you all are, I think, leading the way and doing a great job with that. I will have to connect you, too, with a friend of mine whose church is actually not far from you. He's in Gwinnett, and it's real diverse. And he said ever since the Olympics came there to Atlanta, 20 years ago, it's been diverse, and they're just looking for help. So they're not a city. They're not at all in a city context, not an urban context, but it is a very diverse context. So I made a note.
Oh, no, that would definitely fall under our – oh, no, yeah, definitely. And that would definitely fall under the city umbrella, because I try to be very careful not to make it a black thing, because it's not. It's actually, at conference, the city track is now about 60% white. And so I'm like, great. So it's just churches in the city, and so really we would just, but multicultural churches fall under that too, even if they're in the suburbs. So they all kind of just flow under city.
That's good. Yeah, I know for them, they're reaching a high percentage of Korean folks. So, and it's actually, I think it's something like 50 some different countries represented in their church. So it's very diverse.
That's
I don't
crazy.
know percentage wise, but that's one of the ones that that's a growing population in their church, and they're just trying to figure out, how do we continue to reach them and, not have different churches for every race, which seems to be the normal, right? It's just, every demographic, whatever, has their own church. They're trying to be one church that reaches everybody, which is pretty cool.
Which is incredible. It's like a picture of heaven.
Exactly. Yeah. And I personally never would have thought that about Gwinnett, Georgia. You know what I mean? Like with all my friends that live there and stuff like that. Yeah. It's not necessarily the picture I had, but that's pretty cool. So I could ask you, we could talk forever about this, and even what you did with that program for reaching kids in the city. Maybe we'll come back to it. Yeah. But the reason we're talking today is because you released a book that I got at conference called Find Your Voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I want you to tell us all about how we find our voice and some of the, missteps along the way. But before we jump in, tell us about the book and why you wrote it.
Sure, man. Again, like you said, it's called Find Your Voice. You can get it on Amazon, Orange Books, all of that. But honestly, man, it was a labor of love. It's my first book ever. And so I'm honored that Orange would put it out. It happened in a Mexican restaurant in Milledgeville, Georgia.
Like all books. That makes sense.
Right. My wife, and Reggie Joyner were sitting in this Mexican restaurant eating enchiladas. And he said, "So what is your book going to be about?" And I said, "Well, what do you think it should be about? Like, what topic do you think I am credible enough to speak on?" And he said, "Well, I think, Sam, with your story, with where you've come from, with what you've had to overcome, and all of the different environments that you've had to find yourself in, and I think that you should talk about how to find your voice, because you've had to find your voice in so many different spaces." A lot of people kind of know my story, which we don't have to talk about too much about now, but I got adopted when I was 2 months, and didn't meet my biological family until about 3 years ago on the Steve Harvey Show, which that's the next book. We're going to write about that next. Mm-hmm. But it was just a wild thing on national television, meeting them. But, my whole life, I've had to ask the question, who am I? Who am I? What am I about? And, when you don't have a biological family to look back to, me and my twin sister, we got adopted together, then it really is up to God. And it really is like you trying to find the clues that are already in your life to help you figure out how you've been wired, because there's nobody for you to look at besides obviously your adopted parents, and they do their best, which they did. And they changed my life. I dedicated this book to them and to my sister. But we our whole life, we had to find it. We had to just look for the clues. And at every turn, I had to try to make the right decisions to put myself around people that would help me preserve the voice that I was finding, and would help take me to the next level of what finding my voice would be all about. So the book is about some of my stories, but it's about a ton of principles that I learned growing up, finding myself.
And how would you describe your voice? Like, what is your voice, and how do we find it? Not to go through the whole book, you know what I mean? But what does that mean? Like, what does that mean to you?
Man, I think our voice is, simply put, the unique deposit that God has put inside of all of us that we should be delivering to the world. For instance, I think you found your voice. Is it Blevins, Nick Blevins? Did I say it right?
Yeah. Okay. You got it. It's good.
Right. It's like
different ways. Yeah, I get it a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think this is your voice. It's like, I don't know how you got here, but through a series of I'm sure, experiences and jobs and passion points, you figured out, man, I think I have a voice to speak into family ministry. And I think people recognize that. And now you've got folks listening to you all over the world because you found your voice. And so I think it's that unique thing that all of us has been given that we should be delivering to the world. And for some of us, it's our actual voice, like a podcast. But for some of us, it's a business. For some of us, it's a brand. For some of us, it's a direction. It's a passion point. It's purpose. Your voice is your purpose. What purpose has God put inside of you? And what unique way has he designed for you to deliver that purpose? And that unique way is your voice.
That's good. And I think when I think about even myself, in some ways, I've known what I've wanted to do for a long time. I remember back, I don't know, it's probably 12 years ago now, somebody had talked about the idea of writing, like, I don't know if I'd call it a personal mission statement, but something like that, that would drive you. Right. And I wrote back then, I still have it in a moleskin somewhere, to serve churches to help them reach their full potential. Like, that's the and in some ways I feel like it's taken, I get to do that in a local church, which is great. But even when I wrote that, I thought I would love to help other churches. And I grew up in a church that was really impactful for me, but at the same time, probably never turned outward enough to reach more people. You know what I mean? There's a quote here we'll get to later that I will probably relate to it. But anyway, I think it took a while. Like, I've looked back when I wrote that down, it probably took 10 years. So as people were figuring that out, what would you say to someone who's figuring out, how do I find my voice? Like, what are the obstacles that I got to overcome? What if it's taken a long time and I still haven't found it? Like, how do you help somebody in that situation?
Man, I don't know who I was talking to, but I think it was maybe T.D. Jakes that said that it's not hard to find your purpose because God leaves clues everywhere. Mm. And I think, the statement that I've been using a lot too is that purpose or your voice is not something you find per se. I think it's something you surrender to. And in you surrendering to it, you find it. And so I kind of maybe contradicted myself, but I think you get the point that I'm trying to make, that I would tell somebody that's trying to find their unique thing, their unique voice, their unique sound that they're supposed to deliver to this world. I would say, look for the clues that are already around you. I think we find it in our passions. The big question right here, if somebody wants to write this down, I wrote down for myself, what is everybody asking me to do? Like, what is that one thing or those two things or those three things that people constantly ask me to do? For me, it was speaking, specifically in inspiration. So people would come to me and say, hey, can you lead the meeting? Hey, we got a vision idea. Can you deliver the vision? Hey, Sam, can you talk? Can you preach tonight? Can you do this assembly? Like, I remember the first assembly I did. It was somebody just was asking me to do it, and I didn't know if I would be good. I said, we think you might be good. And after I did my first one, my phone started blowing up. Sometimes I think you have to try stuff to see what sticks. Sometimes you haven't tried the thing that is actually your voice. And in you trying it, people will go, whoa, 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 whoa. You can cook really good. Can you cook for us next week? And you're like, I can cook? Yes, you're incredible. Me? Yes. Or, hey, you know what? Can you lead the youth group? And you're like, lead the youth group? Yeah, you're great with kids. I'm great with kids. How do you know? Well, I saw you outside. It's like, what? I think other people will tell us what our voice is because they can see it from afar. And so I think God leaves clues everywhere. It's in our passions. It's in what we daydream about. It's in what other people constantly are asking us for. It's something that has already been written on our hearts and on our souls. And we just have to surrender to it instead of trying to force some other things to happen. See, I think whatever your voice is something that comes easy to you. Sometimes we have our voice, but we overlook it because we think it's too easy. It's like, no, that can't be my voice. Everybody can do that. And it's like, no, not everybody can do that. Yeah, only true. You, or you're the only, like, you're one of the only people that can organize the house that well, that can stay that up to date on calendars, that is that administrative, that preaches that message like that crafts that statement in that way, that plans those trips and those mission trips that way. You're the only one that mentors at that high of a level. You just have something about you. Man, it's something about you have a way of working with kids. And you're like, what? And sometimes we overlook it because we think it's too easy.
Now, I would imagine, too, I think about people who it is easy for them, but that doesn't mean that they don't get nervous. Like, I think of people who actually are good teachers, but they're early on in it, right? And so they're still very nervous about it. Like, you've done this so long, teaching and hosting, that maybe there's some level of nerves, but it's not like it was when you first started. So there's always that fear. You probably got to push through, right, to find your voice. What about other barriers that get in the way? What do you think are some obstacles that we need to overcome to find our voice?
Man, in the book, I talk about 3 areas that if we don't leverage them right and understand how they work and how they influence us, it could destroy our voice, and it could destroy the path that we're on to even finding our voice. And the first area is friends. It is friends. There's nothing worse than surrounding yourself with people that are jealous of you, that don't want to celebrate you, that don't want to support you, or that want to take you off the path that you need to be on to deliver your voice to this world. For me, I talk a little bit about 2 guys that I grew up with that ended up in different places. We grew up on the same block, in the same neighborhood, or, some would say the same hood, And one of them grew up to be a lawyer. The other one grew up and, he ended up in jail. We had another friend that got shot, and passed away. I mean, there's so many stories, but one friend continued to surround himself with people and with opportunities and with mentors, and with positive friends that were promoting him doing the right thing. And the other friend surrounded himself with friends that promoted doing the wrong thing. And while we've all had an opportunity, and while they both had an opportunity to find their voice at a high level, one person surrounded himself with the wrong circle, and it destroyed his ability and his direction, the direction that he was on, to finding his voice. I think sometimes it's about atmosphere, which we talk a little bit about in the book as well, is that sometimes it's just about finding your voice, is just about being in the right atmosphere in which your voice can be found. And so for me, my mother understood that, man, he's got some things going on with art. He loves being in front of people. He can sing, he can act. I need to put him in the atmosphere where he can develop that, in which he can see other people that maybe are a little bit further along on that journey of that voice. Like, they've developed it to a higher level. So she put me in a performing arts high school because she just knew if let me take him out of public school and put him in a performing arts high school, and he'll find his voice. And for me, I fought it. What do they call it? Tooth and nail. I fought her so hard. I said, no, I'm playing basketball. And she said, oh, okay, sweetie. Sweetie, I know you want to play ball. She said, here's the thing. We're not going to take ball away from you. But what we will do is we'll let you play AAU, but would you try out this art school for 6 months? And if you hate it, we'll take you back to the public school. I said, 6 months, that's it. She said, just 6 months. If you hate it, we'll take you out. Well, 4 years later, I was still there.
Wow. That was a bold step for them, because, like, what if you hadn't connected and it was still good for you? You know what I mean? Like,
right,
in 6 months,
right.
And at that age, a lot of things could not go right, even though it probably could have been best for you. But I'm glad it did work out as a bold.
She did. I mean, I'm telling you. So she just saw something, and she's like, I got to get him around people like him. So I think those friends are important, because my friends, I mean, it's people look, by 10th grade, I was playing six instruments. And when I went to the school, I was only playing one. But people often ask me, how did you figure out that many instruments? All my friends played everything. Like, every friend that went to the school played everything. And I would just be walking down the hall, and I would be by one friend who played the guitar, and I would just sit and watch him play all day. And so then he would teach me. And it was my friends that helped me develop my talent and helped me find my voice. And so I would say that I think one of the biggest obstacles we all face in finding our voice is who we surround ourselves with.
And when I think about people listening to this podcast, we both know that there are tons of leaders who are connected to other ministry leaders, right? Orange, or through their own networks, or locally. But we also know there are a ton of people, many who are listening to this podcast, who probably don't have that network of friends outside the church, because I think you need it in your church. But it is nice too to have that community, like, outside of your church, of other people who do similar roles. So I always push for that. And I feel like this is just another reason behind that, is so that you can have other people who are encouraging you, supporting you, helping you grow. So anyway, I just had to throw that in there. I feel like it's
but
it can be helpful to others.
I have to totally agree with that, because we all know the greatest youth pastors hang around some of the greatest youth pastors. Mm-hmm. And that's how you become amazing. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about this later, but if you surround yourselves with youth pastors or children's pastors or family pastors that accept mediocrity, then it's easy for you to accept it as well, because you're like, well, that becomes the standard. Maybe this is what we do we all know that one person we met in ministry that took the lid off for us. It was like, man, I spent one lunch with them, and I see youth ministry, and I see family ministry. I see ministry totally different because of that one lunch. So I'm just agreeing with you.
There's the quote that you kind of alluded to there that I thought I just loved it. It was super powerful, and I think it affects us in church world a ton.
Yeah.
It says eventually collective thought becomes a group's shared reality, whether it's real or not. I just love that because I think about so many things so many ways that shows up true in the church. So you tell us what what you mean by that, and then maybe we can talk about it as it relates to church and ministry.
Yeah, one of the things that I realized and that I often ask myself, even when writing this book, as we were talking about friends, we were going off of the quote of "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your destiny." Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about that because we hear that a lot. I think we've all heard, like, you are who you hang around. And I started asking myself the question, why do we become the people that we hang around? And what I realized my entire life was, it wasn't that I wasn't smart enough to make a different decision, even though some of my friends may have been making the bad one. It wasn't that. What it was is my desire and my need to be accepted. That was it. It wasn't about greatness. It wasn't about mediocrity. It was about acceptance. And so for me, what I realized, and I think we all know that growing up, when you have a friend circle, I think our desire to be accepted overrides our desire sometimes to be excellent. And so what happens is that you want your friends in your circle to go, hey, you're doing this well. We believe in you. We love what you're doing. And when they don't do that, it feels like you're taking your cues about, am I doing something wrong or right, from the people that are automatically around you. And so you just either surrender or you rise to the level of friends that you hang around. And so for me, when I think about the people that taught me how to play the piano and that were playing all these instruments, I didn't start playing all of those instruments just because I wanted to. Now I wanted to, but everybody was playing like 8 instruments. And so, when you're a young person, you're going, man, I can't be left out. I only play one. I got to get at least 2 more.
Yeah, I can't play 2 instruments. Who plays 2 instruments? Meanwhile, I play no instrument. I wasn't even good on the recorder, man. Like, that was too hard for me.
Well, no, it's something about it that it makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. He's like, well, everybody else is playing. Is there something wrong with me? And so I think we see that in the youth pastor space and in the ministry space as well. It's like we all thought that just having, a couple stage lights and, a worship leader was the max until we went to North Point. And then it was like, wait a minute. Now, what they got lights, they got sound, they got hip hop. The programming is incredible. I mean, it wasn't until we got around some friends or peers and we saw something different that we said, where I'm at is may not be the best thing. I need to rise to the level of the people that are around me. And so I think it's one of the reasons why Orange is so transformative, especially Orange Conference, because when you go, when you sit there and you see the lights, the camera, and you see all this programming, you go, there's a better way that I can do this. And if they're doing it, maybe I should try to reach further. I mean, there's this thought of, am I not doing enough? And you might be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But it's like that. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like that healthy balance, though, because you don't want it to be so extreme that like the only reason you're doing it is peer pressure or whatever. But healthy competition or healthy desire to improve is really good versus if I'm just with all these friends who they don't push me and challenge me at all. In fact, they hold me back or bring me down or they're lazy or whatever. Like that's going to send you the opposite direction.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think that that's the point I want to make. It's just that it's not necessarily a moral or immoral concept. It's just more amoral. It's just like, hey, here's the principle. The principle is that it's very difficult for us to rise above the level that our friend circle decides to operate in. And so so for me, to put it plainly, I'd say whenever I want to go to another level, I get a new friend. I get a new friend because I realize wherever I'm at right now, is I am the direct reflection of the people that I'm hanging around. So I either get a new friend or I spend more time with the friends that I want to be more like. Because they, you know what I'm saying? They teach me how to dream bigger and my level of, how do I want to say this? Expectation for myself rises.
That's good. How about, because when I read this, I thought about, hey, we're all in ministry. We're influencing leaders and parents and kids and all of that. So how can we help other people find their voice? Because when I read this, when I hear you talk about your story, I even think about the people that helped me discover my voice, like my youth pastor, right? A couple leaders, key leaders and stuff like that. And staff I'm with now and other friends that I've made in ministry. So how can we intentionally, as church leaders, help people find their voice when they're part of our ministry?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this at Orange. This was my first year ever keynoting in a session. And the bottom lines that we kind of landed with was we're preachers inform, mentors transform, sponsors platform. And what we were breaking down was this concept of how do you help the next generation find their voice? How do you help anybody find their voice? Well, I think that the first thing that we have to do, or that we should do, is connect them to the people that are going or have arrived at where they want to go. Or, and if it's not the people, maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a blog post. Maybe it's YouTube videos. Connecting them to another source that is where they're trying to go. Or just spending time with them enough to help them discover who they are. And I think for me, I use my parents as an example because in the book we talk about leaders that, your leaders, as well as your friends, also help you find your voice. They come into your life and they help steer you in the right direction. Well, my parents were my leaders growing up. And I think they looked at me and they started noticing things about me that needed to be enhanced. And so for me, I would say one of the ways that we help others find their voice is to speak life into them about the special things that are going on that they may not see. And so I think a little bit of that is choosing to be courageous enough to encourage, to be courageous enough to make somebody else the star, to be courageous enough and vulnerable enough and brave enough to say something that you may not necessarily say all the time, to speak life. Speaking life into people a lot of times can be, nerve-wracking because you're going, man, are they going to look at me like I'm crazy?
Yeah. It's just going to get awkward.
Right. It's just going to get awkward. And it's like, and to be honest, it might, but I don't know if that awkwardness is worth missing an opportunity to connect somebody to a new idea about themselves that they may not already know. Mm-hmm. Because it was the people that showed up in my life, and I'm sure in your life, consistently going, hey, let me have a conversation with you. Here's something I see you doing that I think you should pay attention to. You're a leader. You've got something in you, and I think God has something big for you. There, people like you, man, and you've got influence. You should leverage that. Hey, you know what? You're a phenomenal singer. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to expand that? It was those people that took that risk. They said, I don't care if it gets awkward. I'm telling you what I see. You know what I'm saying? Yep.
Yeah. And I think about that in my own life, but yet sometimes it is so easy to, I don't know, not slow down enough to not only notice that, but say that to other people.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Which is just a missed opportunity, obviously, if we do that. So hopefully, I don't know, like when I come at it, like after talking to you and read this book, like I think about, I need to see some more opportunities to speak encouragement into somebody's life or to point out a strength or a gift or a voice that they have that, because I don't know, it's kind of like you're alluding to, people oftentimes don't know what their voice is, yet it's obvious to everyone else. You probably shouldn't take for granted that they know because they may not know. Right.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and I think, one of the statements, and when I sat with Jeff Henderson and I was talking to him about this concept, he said something, and we kind of crafted this statement that one of the best ways to help, here it is, one of the best ways to find your voice is to help other people find their voice. And so I think there's a lot of people that are having a difficult time finding their voice because they haven't helped anybody else find theirs.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And I think for me that was in my story as well. In the last chapter, we talk about this idea of followers, that the 3 influences in your life that help you find your voice are the friends you hang around, the mentors or the leaders that are in your life to help guide you, and the followers that you decide to intentionally lead to another place. And what I talk about in this whole followers chapter is this idea of social media, that we live in, one of the easiest ages to acquire influence. Whether we want it or not, we become leaders overnight as soon as somebody hits like or follow. And they just, we literally, we're literally influencing them whether we want to or not. And the question is how do we help influence them or steer them in the right way? How do we leverage that influence to help them find their voice? And so for me, I think me just trying to help these inner city kids and trying to help other young artists figure out who they are helped me figure out who I was. I was just like, man, I guess you've wired me to inspire. And I didn't even know that. I was just trying to help people not make the same mistakes I was making. And I looked up, and overnight I was a pastor.
Yeah.
And I think, I think there's a ton of accountants that we know that figured out that they were accountants because they were just trying to help somebody manage their books. Mm. They were just trying to help someone, get out of debt. And next thing you know, you look up and you're Dave Ramsey, and you're like, now wait a minute. What is happening? I mean, there's so many different stories that we could give of people who have become incredible and have found their voice just by trying to help somebody else become better or find theirs. And I think that it's a missed opportunity for us if we're not actively seeking how to help people become better. Because that's what we're really trying to say. How do we help people become better? How do we help them find their purpose and fulfill it? In other words, how do we help them find their voice?
That's good. Well, I appreciate you writing the book, your first book. I know that's, like you said, a labor of love. That's a big deal. Congratulations. And I love the work you're doing with Orange, and appreciate you coming on the podcast. How can people connect with you if they have any questions? Obviously, we'll link to the book and your site and all that, but how can people connect with you?
Oh, for sure, man. Wait, quick question. Do you like the book, Nick? Do you like it?
I do like the book.
Nick, you are crazy. I think people can get it. They connect with me on social media at Sam Collier, on all platforms, Twitter, Facebook, all of that. And, I'll say this about the piece. We wrote it with students in mind as well. And so we wanted that age group from about 16 all the way up to 35, or just leaders in general, young leaders trying to find their voice, leaders that are trying to find their voice, or students that are really trying to find their voice. We kept them in mind because a lot of this content was stuff I wish I would have had as well when I was a student and when I became a young adult and a leader as well. And so, get it for your seniors, get it for your juniors, for people for your college students, or for just folks on your staff, all of that. The idea is that we want to help people. I want to help people discover who they are.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny that you say that it was written with like students, teenagers in mind, because when I've read it, I kept thinking about that. And part of it was, I think I thought of my own story, and when I think about that, I think about being like 16 and then roles people played in my life since then. But you also got a Black Panther reference in there. So bonus points for that, because that was fun.
I did. I threw that in. I did.
Yeah, that worked really well with the book and how the movie tied in there. Kudos. Good job. Well, Sam, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing with us. And best of luck with the book. I know it's brand new release, so everybody can go and find it, buy it, and maybe hand it out to students in their ministry. I think we could all do a better job for sure of helping people find their voice, and especially like that high school age, that middle school, high school age. So Thank you. Appreciate it.
Man, thank you, Nick. Man, you're awesome. I'm so honored to be on this podcast.
Sam is a lot of fun, isn't he? Love his passion. I'm so glad he was encouraged to find his voice and people encouraged him to help him find his voice. And I'm glad that he's using it to help us and other people through his book. Action items are probably pretty simple. I think you should get the book, read it. Maybe you think you haven't discovered your voice yet, and maybe the book can help you there. But certainly all of us, most of us listening, serve on staff in a church or volunteer in a church. And I feel like there's a responsibility we have to help other people find their voice, even students like we talked about together in that interview. How can we help students or leaders that serve in our ministry, volunteers? How can we help them find their voice as well so that everybody can use their influence, like Sam talks about, to live a greater story? You can get links and things that we put in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 104. So that wraps up 2 years of the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Can't wait to start year 3 next week. We'll kick off year 3 with an interview with Dan Scott about his new book, Caught in Between. And I know this book has blown up. It was super popular at the Orange Conference, and he did a breakout that was massive because so many people are interested in this topic of serving preteen kids and their families in a unique way. You know, that's not the same as children's ministry, not the same as student ministry. I really think that's filling a void there that was needed. And so I love the book he's written, and you'll hear us talk about that next week. But thanks for listening, for downloading, sharing, subscribing, all of that. Thanks for 2 years. Some of you have been listening that whole time. Just want to say thank you. Appreciate you. We do all this for you to help you grow as a leader, to help your church. And I really hope that it has shown up in specific ways in your leadership, in your ministry, and in your church. Until next week, hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you as we start year 3 of the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.